Welcome to Rat Salad Review. Today we are here with Howard Johnson. You're actually the editor of Rock Candy magazine and also the vocalist from Dawn After Dark. Welcome to Rat Salad Review.
Nice to be here. It's a strange combo, isn't it? Not many people put their heads above the parapet and play in bands when they're writing about it and critiquing others.
Right. Yeah. Actually, because I do the same thing. I play music. I don't know if you see the drums behind me, but how do you deal with that? Like say you're critiquing somebody's band, and maybe you can't think of like good things to say about it or whatever. I mean, how do you deal with that negative feedback sometimes?
I think that the trick for me, because I've been doing both for a long time, and particularly the music writing, is just to try and be scrupulously honest. I think it gets easier as you get older, right? Because you don't have that desire to want to please all the time. When you're young and you're starting out, you kind of want to feel that you're friends with the people who you are working with, and that when you go on the road with bands, that it's very important that you kind of strike up a personal relationship with them. And actually, over the years, I've come to the conclusion that's probably the wrong thing, because really you're doing a disservice to the people you're writing for. Your job isn't there to become friendly with musicians, though obviously it's very nice when that happens. But your primary function is to be honest and to try to be critical about music in a way that is, I would say resolutely impersonal. I don't think it's my place to make comments about people, their private lives, their attitudes that aren't related to music. I think at the end of the day, I'm there to make a critique of whether I like a band's music and to be able to justify that, and that's as far as it goes.
Yeah. I actually do stuff on TikTok as well. And a couple of days ago, I posted a video of something, and somebody asked me if I liked Dokken. So I'm not a huge fan of Dokken, so I made a joke. Neither. Yeah, oh, good. But I made a joke, funny video, about this. Are you talking about this band here, but this shitty song or whatever? I had so much hate about that. It was actually pretty funny. But the amount of people that got so bent about that, I'm like, oh my god, it's just Dokken. It's one band.
I think it's kind of a weird moment when you realize that what you have to say about a piece of music can have such a profound effect on people. I think it's funny that you pick out Dokken to talk about, because a friend of mine from back in the day when I used to work on Kerrang, and he did too, went and interviewed Don Dokken, and I think it must have been in the 80s when they were opening for, I think it was Motley Crue, and Don Dokken had the perspicacity and the humility to quote a review from the New York Times that said, when Dokken came on stage, a record number of hot dogs were sold. So much as I'm not a fan of his music, I find that shows a certain amount of character that I like.
Right. Yeah. He's always seemed like a really good character, but he's an awesome guitar player too. I'm just not a fan of his music. But and as you just mentioned too, you worked with Kerrang. Why did you not continue to work with them?
Well, funnily enough, I mean, it's a weird situation talking about Kerrang, because I was never employed full time by them. I was always a freelancer. The time that I spent with them was around about 10 years, from 81 when the magazine launched, or very soon after, until around about 1990. And yet much of my working life as a music journalist has been defined by those 9 years, because Kerrang was such an incredibly important journal at a time when that was the way that people got access to information about music that was kind of, periphery, certainly periphery in the UK where I was living. Yeah. So it's always very strange to think that really much of my working life as a music journalist, and I haven't only been a music journalist in my time, but certainly my time as a music journalist has been predicated on having worked at Kerrang at a really important time. And I'm very grateful for that. It was a brilliant time, fantastic time to be a print journalist, because you were treated in ways that now I think journalists can barely imagine. The idea that you could get to spend a week on the road with AC/DC or Bon Jovi or Guns N' Roses or whoever it was, is now just completely unthinkable. So I'm very grateful for having been around at that time, and I think that I'm also grateful for the fact that I didn't hang on there too long. There was, it was a great period, and I got to the point around about 1990 where there was some practical issues to deal with. You don't make a lot of money as a music journalist, and I was getting, I was getting to be in my mid-20s and finding that I had desires to build a life outside of, working for a music paper. So that was all kind of boring and practical reasons why I decided to move on. But in many ways, I look back on it now and think I'm glad I did what I did, because there's nothing worse than people overstaying their welcome. And it also means that lots of other people who had the same passion that I did, younger people, came in and took up the mantle on Kerrang and carried it on. And I think that that's kind of the order of things and how things should go.
Yeah. And now, how'd you get involved with Rock Candy?
Well, Rock Candy was really just a brainchild of myself and two other guys who worked for Kerrang in that period through the 80s. Derek Oliver, who is the owner of the magazine, and a guy called Malcolm Dome, who sadly passed within the last 3 months. Wow. And we were both, all three of us were just, rock fans at our core. We didn't really feel that there was a magazine out there that was talking about what we felt were our formative years as music writers in a way that reflected how we felt about it, because we were much older guys, and we felt that we wanted to retain that original enthusiasm that we all had for Kerrang when it started, but be able to talk about things in a way that was kind of, a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more reflective, and less gushing in praise of absolutely everything that was long-haired and loud guitared. So I think kind of that was really where the motivation came from to do it. And I think that, it's a bit of an anomaly as a magazine, because it exists in a time where most people don't read long articles. They certainly don't buy printed magazines. And we've kind of gone against the grain by going, we want to go deep on stuff. We want to get really to the core of, how bands operated in that period, what they think about it now, which is a real blessing in doing the magazine now, because you're dealing with people who's kind of, to a large degree, their races are run. So they don't have to do the bullshit, hey, everything's great and isn't our next album so wonderful and life's great on the road. They can actually, look back and give you some perspective on it, and a lot of the time talk in a way that is just much more honest than it was back in the day.
Yeah. Did you ever think about getting into like the podcasting stuff that's been blowing up lately?
Kind of thought about it, but the reality of the situation is running a magazine that's like a cottage industry. So you've got small team producing content that takes quite a lot of work, quite a lot of knowledge, and quite a bit of time. Plus, then doing a band really doesn't leave a whole lot of time for it. So I guess the answer to that is probably when retirement beckons, then the podcast will arrive.
Yeah, that's how I like, because I used to have a band too. Well, I still do. I do a couple of different bands now, but when I first originally left my first band, I'm like, I'm kind of done with music, but I still wanted to talk about music. That's why I wanted to start the podcast. So this kind of helped me still stay in with that music thing, It's I couldn't imagine myself not doing something involving music. So I had to do this.
I love the podcast format, and I think that it's got real potential. I think as a user of podcasts, one of my criticisms, I guess, would be that it seems like everybody and his dog wants to put out a podcast, right, and a lot of people don't really think very carefully about what it is they're trying to do and why it would be different and what it's going to bring to our understanding of music. There are people who do great things, but there's a lot of stuff that I listen to and kind of go, is the world of music a richer place for that? I'm not so sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know that's one thing I was always afraid of doing a podcast, but you know what? I'll try for a while. Yeah, I've been doing it since 2018, so far so good.
Yeah, so something's working.
Yeah, and we're still growing. The channel actually just got 800 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you everybody who is subscribed. And yeah, we got lots of followers, like I said, on TikTok and everything. So things are going up and up and up every few weeks, so that's good. So getting into the band, were you singing? Actually, your band, this band started like 30 something years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny story. Is that how it happened was that I was working on Kerrang as a freelancer all through the 80s, and I had a kind of what you might call a eureka moment, because my background was very traditional rock. I was 15 years old in England when the new wave of British heavy metal started, so that was obviously quite an important and formative period in my musical life. But I found very quickly by the mid 80s that I was getting bored of a lot of the kind of American rock that was being really touted on Kerrang a lot of the time. I found that it had become very formulaic, very repetitive, driven by a desire to be on heavy rotation on MTV from when I was in the States doing reports on bands. I saw how influential that was becoming. It just felt to me that it had become a little formulaic and a little dull, repeating formulas, because there was so much money being made, so many records being bought.
It hasn't changed either.
And I was looking for something different. And the thing that really sparked me was I was taken by a PR to see a band in Oxford, which is probably, I don't know, an hour and a half outside of London. I didn't really know the band. I'd heard a couple of songs, and that band was the Cult. And I saw the Cult play in Oxford to probably maybe 1,000 people, 1,200 people, something like that, and it was transformative for me, because it felt like there was a band out there that had the same roots that I did, your classic 70s rock roots from Led Zeppelin through Deep Purple, onto the more American bands that had come out, so Hendrix, obviously, just what you would call classic rock, but they'd taken it and done something different with it. So you could hear those roots, but it didn't sound like any of those groups. It certainly didn't sound like any of the kind of the hair metal things that were becoming popular in America. And I found that very inspiring, and that really made me feel like I wanted to play music myself, which is kind of a big leap to go. I was always really excited by music, but to suddenly go, actually, I feel like this has inspired me to want to make music was a big thing. And so I started a band in Birmingham, where I'd been at college and where I was still living despite working for Kerrang as a freelancer at the time. And that happened in '86. And there was quite an interesting scene that was going on in the UK at that time, which I don't know if it ever really translated to America. It was a thing called Grebo, and it was kind of like bands that wanted to play heavy music but didn't really want to be associated with, the kind of the overly theatrical makeup and teased hair type thing. So there were bands that maybe in America nobody ever heard of, Zodiac Mind Warp and the Love Reaction. There was a band called Crazy Head, Gay Bikers on Acid, all kinds of weird and wonderful bands, some of them great, some of them not so great. But what they were trying to do at least was kind of, to capture the visceral excitement of playing loud guitar-oriented music with something that felt like it was trying to go somewhere new. And I guess that kind of inspired me to want to make that kind of music. And we ended up playing a lot of shows in the UK through '86 to '89. We had a deal with a well-respected indie label called Chapter 22, which had bands like The Mission, Balaam and the Angel, who again are perhaps groups that aren't particularly well known in the States. And we put out 3 12 inches on that label and played with an awful lot of bands, probably did maybe 200 shows. Before, at the end of the 80s, the whole thing disintegrated and splintered for the usual nonsensical reasons of people falling out and not being able to see the wood for the trees. Ours was that there was a potential publishing deal on the table that never really materialized, and people fell out about who should get what, all the usual stories.
Oh, yeah.
And then I put that to bed and went and did all kinds of other things in the music industry and in the sporting industry for a very, very long time, for kind of, 20 years really, without having any urge to scratch the performing itch, until in 2019, a promoter completely out of the blue phoned us and asked if we would be interested in putting the band back together for a show in Birmingham, where we were from, with some of those bands that had been around in that era. And really, I hadn't had any intentions of doing anything musical at all, but it just felt like a good idea. So we decided to do it again. And then it was a very strange night, because we ended up playing in the place where we'd spent so many years as a band. And when we went on stage, there were kind of like, a couple of hundred people in there who I hadn't, imagined would ever have remembered the band. Right. And they went crazy, and it was a brilliant night, and we had a lot of fun. And then it was kind of felt like, well, are we going to leave it here? And then the promoter, who had actually decided that he was going to resurrect the Chapter 22 label, asked if we would be interested in recording an album, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Oh, wow. That's funny. You mentioned the Cult and the Mission. I'm a huge fan of the Mission, and the Cult I'm kind of just getting into. But when I listen to the album, I definitely hear a little bit of a mix of both of those bands, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair comment. Everyone who's ever made music would like everyone to say it's original. Everything that you hear is completely new. I've never heard it before. clearly, all bands come from somewhere. Right. That's very much our background. I think that we always talk about wanting to be a band that plays like a heavy rock band and listens to all kinds of different music. The energy that we bring to the record, I think, to New Dawn Rising, is palpable. I'm very proud of it. I think it stands up against anything that could be described as a classic rock sound. But you're absolutely right. Those influences are there. Nothing that I'm ashamed of. I think it gives us something that stands outside what you might call the traditional classic rock vibe, while still being clearly recognizable as such. I mean, we're actually playing shows in the UK at the moment with another band that I don't know if you're aware of, called Wolfsbane, who were on Deaf American.
It was Blaze Bailey's band, right?
It was Blaze Band, and we're actually doing shows with them right now in the UK. And they are very much a classic heavy metal band. Right. Very different sounding to what I think we sound like, but it fits perfectly well. We go down well with their audience. We get on well with those guys as bands. My attitude has always been we're a rock band, pure and simple, and I hope that that's what comes across when people listen to the music.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and I love the album. I think it's really awesome, and I there's not even one song maybe Maximum Overdrive. I really love that song. It's got kind of like an AC/DC type feel to it.
That's right. I mean, you're absolutely right. AC/DC kind of up to Back in Black was massive influence on me, massive influence on a lot of the guys in the band. And I think that, yes, you do hear some of those influences in there again. And again, that's something to me as a rock fan. If people compare what we do to, what I call classic era AC/DC, well, I'll bite your hand off.
Right. Now, some of these songs are from those original singles that you released back in the 80s. And it was that song was one of them. How much do they differ from the original versions? Are they pretty much the same, or?
No, they're not really the same. I mean, you could certainly look at, there are effectively 3 songs that were released as A-sides of 12-inch singles in the UK in the 80s, and all 3 of those songs appear on the album. There's one, Maximum Overdrive, that you mentioned. There's another song called The Groove, and a third song called Crystal High. Now, all of those songs were recorded by a band on limited budgets, as it was back in the day. Right. And as you know, if you listen back to records that were made at that time, even bands that had enormous recording budgets were still producing stuff that you might listen to today and go, do you know what, with a laptop at home, a couple of decent mics, you can record something that sounds better.
Right.
So, there was always, in my mind, what felt like a little bit of unfinished business, because I don't think those records ever really captured what the band sounded like in the live environment. And so that was a motivating factor, not only to want to make a record. See, I still use the word record because I'm old school.
It's all right. I have records.
still to want to make an album, because I felt that there was an opportunity to produce something that would capture the sound that I heard back in the 80s in my head. And I think that was a big motivating factor, as I say, and being able to make an album that really did sound the way I wanted the band to sound was a fantastic experience. And I think that what happens with those old songs is that they sound entirely different, and there are certain differences in the arrangement, but not wildly so. They're more punchy. They're played better because we're much more experienced musicians now.
Yeah.
But really, the key factor is the fact that you can make a record that sounds like a big chunky rock record, which is what we did.
Yeah,
and did it in 5 days, which back in the 80s was a completely impossible task.
Right, exactly. Now, the other songs that you have on the album, were they songs that you just came up like on the spot, or did you have them over time, or how those come about?
No, what we had was kind of like a grab bag of material that had been worked on in the original incarnation of the band in the 80s, but a lot of it had either been demoed but very quickly, never released, or there'd be a poor quality rehearsal room tape of something. So everything that's on the album has its roots in something that we did in the 80s, but there are, along the scale, really huge differences in terms of what those songs originally sounded like and what they sound like on the album. Some of them sound pretty similar to how they did in the 80s. Some of them sound entirely different. You probably wouldn't even recognize them if you didn't know what the roots of those tunes were. So it's kind of like, a really big difference in the how each song has come to be made. And again, the exciting part for me about making the album was the fact that all of this stuff that was kind of, on little weird cassettes here and there, could be reworked. Over the course, we probably did 2 weeks of rehearsal, knocked all the songs into shape, and then straight to do the album. So, it was kind of pretty exciting way of doing it, flying by the seat of your pants. But I think the results turned out well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, also, when you guys got back together, you did not reunite with some of the original members, because I believe one passed away, right? Not too long ago.
Yeah, sadly, the bass player Dave from the original band, he passed away. I mean, I hadn't spoken to him in many, many years, but I heard through an interesting source, actually, because one of the roadies for Dawn After Dark in the very early days has now gone on to become Adrian Smith's guitar tech in Iron Maiden.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
So he was the one who told me that David passed, unfortunately. The two guitarists, one was a guy called Rich. We managed to track him down. He didn't have the same enthusiasm for the project that myself and Tony, the drummer, did. And George, who was the other guitar player, just couldn't find anywhere, which in this day and age of everyone leaving a trace, in social media, here, there, and everywhere, is frankly phenomenal. And believe me, we tried and couldn't find him. So no, it's not the original lineup. The original members are myself and Tony Henderson, who's a drummer, and then 2 new guitar players, one of whom Tony has played with for 20 years in other projects, because Tony never stopped playing music, and a new bass player who was in a band in the 80s that, again, probably wouldn't be known in America, but had a little bit of success in the UK, called For God's Sake. His name is Drew. So the band is guys who are all kind of 40 to mid 50s. And the great joy of doing it is that we do it for no other reason than pleasure. And feeling that our music is good enough to be heard. And we go out and we play shows with no other intention than to just do the best performance we possibly can. There's nothing riding on it for me personally, nor the other guys. So in many ways, I think that that's, in 2022, probably the purest way that people of my age group can make music, is to go, I'm not here for any other reason than the love of the music. That, you know, the time that's invested in it, the time that's invested in going out on the road and playing, is not because we have any kind of belief that somehow some major label is going to pluck us out of obscurity and turn us into, you know, a regular touring band. We do it because we love the music that we make, and we're allowed to make it uninhibited from any commercial constraints whatsoever. We have a really supportive record label in Chapter 22. A guy called Dean Brown runs that label, and he's in it for the same reasons as we are, because he loves the music, and that gives you tremendous freedom to be able to just really do exactly what you want, write the music that you want, squeeze every inch of enjoyment out of doing it, without having to worry about whether there'll be enough people through the door at a gig to pay the bills, whether you're going to get, you know, an option for an album's going to get picked up and you're going to be able to make another one. Those are issues that don't concern us, and in many ways that's hugely liberating. Yeah,
actually I feel the same exact way, because, you know, I'm at that age now where, you know, I have a job. I don't need music to support myself, so I'm just doing it to have fun, you know, and I like creating things.
There are obviously people at the top of the tree who earn, you know, a great living out of it, and that's fine, and they are what you would call your traditional rock stars. And then there are an awful lot of people who are, you know, still professional musicians who are having to really work incredibly hard to keep their head above water. And you know, I take my hat off to them. It's a brave move to live your life like that. But I think that the way that Dawn After Dark is set up is perfect for the integrity of the music.
Yeah, definitely. Now, how did you become a singer? I mean, were you always like a singer? Did you want to be a singer when you were younger, or how'd that become?
A fierce lack of talent at playing an instrument. I think that's probably what it was. Like most people who think they can sing, I kind of felt that I had some attitude that I could bring to a band. I felt I had some things to say, not that it's, you know, remotely kind of political or deep, and but I felt that I had a way of expressing words that were perhaps different to what your classic traditional rock bands were, and I felt that my voice was good enough, and I think over the years I've probably surprised myself by the quality of what I've been able to produce. I actually listen back to you know, the new Dawn Rising album and feel very satisfied and happy with my vocal performance on it, and I think that's perhaps testament to caring about the art of it and really wanting to improve and be as good as you possibly can be.
Yeah. Now, do you sing fairly much similar to what you did back in the 80s, or you had to change it up a little bit?
I kind of, you know, I feel that there's a little bit more life experience, I suppose, in the way that I sing. It's not that something that I've ever really, I didn't consider when I went in to record the album. I wasn't going, how am I going to sing that's different to how I sang in the 80s? But I think it's just natural, you know, the tones of your voice change as well. Yeah. And luckily I've kept all the power that I had. And I think there's a rounder tone to my voice that I prefer. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's obviously people who know the band from the 80s will be able to make their own judgment on that. But touch wood, so far people seem to be very complimentary about, you know, not only my performance but the whole performance of the band. It doesn't feel like the reviews that we've received suggest that, you know, this is a bunch of old guys playing at it. The reviews have been very positive and said this feels like a genuine rock band playing genuine rock music and
Right.
coming from a genuine place. And I think that's the most you can hope for.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that same exact thing because sometimes, like Blue Oyster Cult, I mean, they're an older band, and you can
Yeah.
tell not with the newest album. Actually, you can tell there's some younger people working with them, but as there some of the older albums, you can tell that they're getting kind of old, and even some of their solo projects that they've done over the years, you can tell
Yeah.
that they're a lot older. But you guys, if I didn't see a picture of the band or anything, I would not know. You guys were older. I would have no idea because you do sound more like a younger group of guys, especially with the music. It's very upbeat and everything.
Yeah, well,
So,
I mean, that's really nice to hear, and thank you for the comment. It's
and,
really
and even the production too. The production is very crisp and very clear, and it's a very, very clear production. It's a top notch, done really well.
I mean, I'm very happy to hear that you think that, and I guess what I would say is that because of my background as a music journalist, I'm probably acutely aware of whether what Dawn After Dark does passes muster and is actually, good enough to be out there. Because clearly, and quite rightly, I'm there to be shot at. I'm up there giving my opinions about other people's music. So it's entirely fair and appropriate that people should be allowed to give their opinions unvarnished about mine. So I was very aware of that myself, that I wanted to make sure that I was going to put that album out and go, I'll stand by that no matter what anybody says. And I think that, we achieved it. I've lived with the record for a good few months now and still feel very happy with what we did and the way it sounds and the performances and the energy that we brought to it.
Yeah. Do you ever think of adding some of those older singles like as bonus tracks on the album, or you just didn't want people to even hear those anymore?
It's not that I don't want people to hear them. I kind of think that music like that's a time capsule. It means different things to different people, and I've realised this when having reactivated the band, is that things that I listened to that we recorded then, I go, well, sonically it's just not up to scratch.
Right.
Other people come up to me at gigs and say, I just absolutely love that song. I love that recording. Because I think a lot of the time, these things are tied up with people's emotional responses. It reminds them of a certain time in their life and what they were doing and where they were carefree and that they were, good relationship, had getting girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever. And I think what I've learned is that I shouldn't be the one to trash their view of something that I might decide isn't good enough for my standards. Right. But I think it's much better for me to just not comment on those records and let people enjoy them for whatever reasons they have. And kind of, leave them where they were. Would I put them as a kind of a bonus track? Probably not. Yeah. I think there are other things that I would like to do with those songs, maybe do acoustic versions of them. Again, take ideas that we've still got kind of in the grab bag that didn't get used for this first album and see if you could work things up. So there are probably ways that I would like to use that old music. But just in terms of giving people that song again attached to new material, probably not for me. We did do one thing, which was on the pre-order of the album, we put a song called What We Are onto it as a bonus track for people who basically paid for the album up front. And that was done as a tribute to Dave Askey, who is the bass player who passed, because it was a song that really highlighted his bass playing. And it was literally a one take in a recording studio song. We had it was a song that hadn't been completely finished. We had 5 minutes at the end of a session. We recorded it live, but it captured a certain something. And obviously, with the fact that Dave's no longer with us, it felt appropriate to let people see that and hear that. And I'm actually very glad that we did it, because it really has to my mind, a lot of charm, because it's so just five guys playing in a room and trying to develop an idea.
Yeah,
but that's
it's very raw.
Yeah, and that's a different way of letting people hear, because that track was never released to anyone. It was, like I say, that it wasn't really completely finished. It was a rough pass at something. But I think that has some kind of emotional depth that means it sits well on a version of the album that people who've already kind of committed to the notion of Dawn After Dark, or already like the notion of what the band is, get to hear.
Right. Now, are you working on new music for another album?
I think the answer to that is probably, but as you all know just as well as I do, there's no money in creating new music now.
Yeah.
So the commitment that's required to build an album of material from scratch is quite considerable. And that's not a financial, that's about committing time, where people are all flung to different corners of the country. I mean, I live in France. I don't even live in the same country as the rest of the band.
Right, yeah.
So there are some logistical issues with that, and just the amount of time that's invested to work up a whole new set of material based on, ideas that need to be fully explored. I think there is a lot of will in the band to want to do it, but when that would be is a little bit up in the air. I'd like to think there will be more music, but I don't think you can say with absolute certainty that that's going to be the case.
Well, that'd be a shame, because this album, I would love to hear a next one, because this one is actually really good, and I will buy this album, because sometimes I'm not sure what a band's going to sound like if I've never heard of it before. But I was really surprised to hear how good the album actually is. So that's why I was hoping hopefully there's another one. So, well,
as I say, it's very much something we would like to do, and if the stars align, we'd like to think it would happen. But it's very nice to hear such positive words, and obviously if your listeners want to go and check out a couple of tracks from the album, they're available on streaming platforms, and on YouTube there are a couple of videos for Maximum Overdrive and Nothing Can Fulfill Me, so people can kind of dip their toes in the water. We took the decision
because, like you said, some of the songs are available on streaming. How come the whole album is not on streaming? As far as Amazon does not have it on streaming at all.
No, we deliberately only put 2 songs up onto streaming platforms to start with, because the record label that financed the album, obviously a small record label, they need to recoup their money. That comes from, not from streaming, as I'm sure you can well imagine, but from selling physical product. And so we took that decision that it was the right thing to do to make sure that we offered a pre-sale album, plus the album's still available from the Chapter 22's website now. And we hope that people understand that that's a decision that is based around recouping the money that's invested by a small record label. And I think that's the right thing to do. And the plan is, now that the album has already recouped, which is good news for us and good news for the record label, we are going to put the full album up onto the streaming platforms, I would imagine, certainly by the end of the summer.
Oh, good. Great. Yeah, because when Ben told me about you coming on the show, I'm like, all right, let me just, because I was at work, and I'm like, let me look it up on streaming real quick, and there's only 2 songs. I'm like, oh man, where's the rest of it? But those 2 songs were good. But so then when he gave me the full album, I was happy to see there's more songs. But I can't wait to hear.
I mean, it's just the nature of the business for bands of our stature, and you need to make sure that you can recoup your costs before you can move forward. But we obviously are very aware that having the full album on streaming platforms will give us access to a much wider public, and that'll help us if when we come to doing more material as and when that happens.
Yeah. How do you feel about the whole streaming thing? I mean, do you miss the physical media, or are you used to the streaming now?
Well, the reality is that I barely put on a CD anymore, because it's just so practical, isn't it? So to stream something on your phone or on your computer is so easy. And so, I'm a part of that world now that wants to have instant access to music wherever, whenever. The notion that you would pay for music seems, for better or for worse, very antiquated now. it's hard to get people to put their hand in their pocket, which is why I'm very grateful for the old Dawn After Dark fans who understood why we were asking them to buy physical products. I think that it's very difficult now as a band to imagine making money out of people listening to your music. Obviously, rock bands in particular have to go out and make money from playing live. And if they're lucky enough to be able to get themselves a publishing deal, there are sync opportunities where people want to sell your music to, advertisers or to film soundtracks or whatever. I think that most bands who are now, professionally active are looking at those methodologies to make money. And that's hard because clearly the business has been turned on its head. It was at one time, everything was a loss leader to make people buy a piece of product.
Right.
Now, a piece of product is a loss leader to make people go and see bands live and buy a T-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere I was talking to a promoter today, and he was telling me, bands that are, you would consider professional bands that have been around for a long time and earn their living making music. Even now, their touring doesn't break even. And the only way they make money is by the merchandise that they sell.
Right.
So that's a tough place to be, isn't it? If you're a band that's trying to feed 5 mouths.
Right. Yeah.
And you're going, my biggest revenue stream had I been around in the 80s, which was selling music, gone. Touring is still expensive. The price of a ticket, it doesn't compensate for the loss of that revenue that bands have had. And so your only methodology is to, like I say, if you're lucky enough to sell some music for an advert or for a TV series, those are few and far between, those opportunities. So really you're looking to sell merchandise to keep a band afloat, and that's a tough ask.
Yeah, unless you're Kiss or even Ghost. I mean, Ghost has so
absolutely.
much.
There are bands who are absolutely smashing it, and they are clearly making very good money, and they have a 50-year history behind them, and they have back catalogue and all that stuff. There's clearly a very lucrative career in music to be had for those people. But Kiss and Iron Maiden are headlining at Donington at the Download Festival in England this weekend, which is the big rock festival of the summer. And I can guarantee you that those bands are being paid phenomenal amounts of money. But I imagine down at the bottom of those bills, because it's a 3-day festival with numerous stages, there will be bands playing on that same show who will be really struggling.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So, the equality of distribution isn't there anymore. And, Paul Stanley isn't going to turn around and go, I tell you what, I'll waive my fee for playing the Download Festival and give it to all the bands on the bottom of the bill, even though he could probably afford it. That's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, he could do it for free. Definitely not going to happen.
There's an argument to say they could, but of course, that's just not going to happen because that's not how people think.
Yeah, no, not at all. But that's crazy. But like I said, this album is really great. New Dawn Rising, the band Dawn After Dark. I wish the best of luck for you and the band and the album and everything. Where can people? You said Catch-22 website, but where can they go to buy it? What's the website?
Yeah, if they want to buy the album, they can go to our website, which is www.thedawners.com.
Okay.
Thedawners.com. Or if they want to look up Chapter 22 Records, Chapter and 22 the number, then they'll be able to find ways to access the album. And as I say, people who buy product from bands these days are really supporting music in a very tangible way. And if people can't afford to buy it, go and listen to the 2 tracks. We hope you love them. And the full album will be on streaming platforms I imagine, the end of the summer.
All right, cool. Are you guys on Facebook and Twitter too, or?
Yeah, we do Facebook. We don't do Twitter because we're strictly old school, but we are on Facebook.
I don't blame you. What are you guys on Facebook?
I think it's Dawn After Dark Official, I think it's called.
Okay. Well, everybody just look up Dawn After Dark.
And that's really, there's a lot of stuff that gets posted there from fans of the band and people who go and see the band live. Like I say, we're on tour with Wolfsbane at the moment, so there's a lot of chatter about what's going on and those things, and probably various people holding up cameras and filming the band and what have you. So, people get an idea of what's going on with the group right now.
Yeah. How has it been touring with Blaze? Blaze gets so much crap for being the Iron Maiden singer for his time period, but I actually love that time period when he was in it. But how is it getting along with him?
The weird thing about touring with Wolfsbane is that actually we toured with them in 1989, so 33 years ago. We were touring with them. And it's just been a joy to be able to see those guys again. I was in touch with Steve Danger, who's the drummer, but the other guys I'd lost touch with, and then to be able to tour with them and sit down and reminisce about the good old days and still watch them do their high energy show to a crowd of people who just absolutely love that band has been a joy. So my thing has always been, I will put Dawn After Dark up against anyone, anytime, any stage, any style of music. So playing with Wolfsbane or playing with an acoustic folk trio holds no fears for me. I just like being out there playing the kind of rock music we play.
Yeah, very good, very cool. All right, well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Howard Johnson. I really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun. It's been a great pleasure. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for your interest. All right, yeah, no problem. And I will be buying that album, I promise, because I really what a good man. All right. And thank you guys for watching. ratsaladreview.com. Hit subscribe on YouTube and all the podcast channels that we're on, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Looking for some new podcasts to listen to? Well, look no further than the Rat Salad Review Network. Rat Salad Review is taking over the podcast world with plenty of shows to choose from within their network of entertaining programming, including the flagship show, Rat Salad Review, with Wayne Noon, Greg Noggle, and Lou Mavs, as well as occasional co-hosts Manny Mejias and James Lilquist. We also have the official Rat Salad Review spin-offs, such as Album vs. Album, Screams from the Grave, where we discuss beloved yet forgotten hard rock and metal albums of the past, and a King Diamond podcast called This Broadcast Belongs to Them. We've also got Old Man Metal's Musings, the Metal Thrashing Nerd podcast with Metal Thrashing Mike, the Timo Tolkki podcast featuring Stradivarius and Avalon founding member Timo Tolkki, the BS Sessions with Mark and Jerry, Just the Cheese Please, a podcast dedicated to cheesy films of the 1980s with Tara J and Adam, and the Music is Life podcast with Lou Mavs. The Rat Salad Review Network is your go-to one-stop shop for the best podcasts out there today. Go to ratsaladreview.com for more info. And to find out where you can find, follow, subscribe, and comment on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and all streaming platforms. The Rat Salad Review Network. We're taking over.